So, about 6 months ago, my older sister decided that she wanted to go find herself by going on a transformative retreat. I'll call her Mary for this post. She had signed up for a trip which was going to take a group of 30 people, including her, to visit different spiritual sites all over the world. My sister has always been into all this spiritual soul searching type of stuff, so this didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was that she was just going to leave her daughter behind while she went away on her trip. For context, my sister has always been a very entitled person. Our parents really spoiled her when we were growing up because she was their first child, and they had been trying to get pregnant for a long time. They had actually given up on any hope of having kids. They let her get away with everything. Every time we had a fight or an argument, they always took her side. If she ever wanted something that belonged to me, my parents would make me give it to her. Plus, because she knew she was their golden child, she would make up lies about me to them because they always believed her. So, obviously, we've never had a close relationship. We don't really talk to each other, and I barely talk to my parents as well. Anyway, Mary had gotten pregnant when she was a teenager. My parents had been angry at first, but after she told them a whole sob story about how she made a mistake and how she needed their help, they forgave her. She didn't want to raise the baby with her ex-boyfriend, and he didn't want to be involved either, so they made a legal agreement that he was going to give up all rights to the baby. He would have to pay a small amount of child support, but he wouldn't be responsible for the baby at all. She ended up having a daughter. I'll call her Alice for the purpose of this post. Mary actually dropped out of college once she got pregnant and was just living off of our parents. They leased an apartment for her and Alice because she refused to live at home with them. Apparently, she wanted her privacy. They also set up a bank account for her so that she could take care of herself and Alice. They never even told her to get a job or anything. Even though Mary was home all day, this didn't stop her from dropping Alice with our mother for hours every day because she was stressing her out. I'll be honest, I've always resented how much my parents favored Mary my whole life. Because my parents were supporting Mary and Alice financially, they refused to help me pay for my college tuition. To be clear, my parents are very successful and could definitely afford to support us both, but they chose only to support Mary and just ignore all of my needs. They didn't help me with a single thing after I turned 18. Mary also likes to taunt me with the fact that she is my parents' favorite. She never once told my parents to treat us both equally. Anyway, back to the story. Mary ended up raising Alice to be exactly like her. She never set any rules for her and never punished her for anything. This is why Alice has grown up to be a completely spoiled and arrogant teenager. She is very rude and refuses to listen to anyone. Even my parents don't like dealing with her because of how rude and disrespectful to them she is. They had bought her a new laptop for her 17th birthday, but instead of thanking them, Alice had thrown the new laptop on the floor and screamed at them for not buying a more expensive MacBook Pro. Mary didn't even scold her for her behavior, and my parents had left early because of how upset they were. So, 6 months ago, Alice turned 18, and Mary decided that now that Alice was technically an adult, she was going to go on her spiritual trip. Alice had chosen not to apply to college and was taking a gap year. I don't think she realized that gap years are supposed to be spent gaining some work or travel experience, not just spending all the time drinking and partying. When Mary told Alice that she was leaving and that she would have to fend for herself, Alice threw a complete tantrum. She couldn't believe that Mary was just leaving her, so she called up our parents to ask them if she could live with them. But my parents actually recently moved into a retirement home in a different state, and they couldn't bring someone to live with them. My mother also told her that maybe Alice should find a job and fix her attitude because the child support payments ended when she turned 18, and she would need to earn her own money. She still didn't see that Alice's behavior is the same selfish behavior as Mary's. After my mom told her no, Alice called me to ask if she could stay with me. I was going to say no because I know how spoiled she is, but she started crying and begging me to let her live with me. I hope that maybe this whole situation had forced her to mature a little bit, and I also felt bad about how Mary was just leaving her behind, so I agreed. She moved in with me 6 months ago, and honestly agreeing to let her live with me was one of the stupidest decisions I have ever made. It's like living with my sister again, but even worse because Alice has completely ruined my whole house. When she had moved in with me, I had sat her down and told her that if she was going to live with me for free, then she would have to follow my rules. I had told her that she would be in charge of making her own breakfast and lunch and doing all of her own dishes. She was also in charge of doing her own laundry. She would also have to keep her room and all the common areas of the house neat and tidy. She couldn't leave her stuff lying around everywhere. She wasn't allowed to throw parties or go out partying with her friends after 12 a.m. I had also agreed to give her $20 a week until she found a job. At first, she had agreed to all of my rules, but within 2 days she started breaking all of them and started treating me like a servant. She told me that she didn't know how to cook and that she expected me to make all her meals or give her extra money so she could order in. She also refused to do any of the dishes because it was disgusting, and she also expected me to do all of her laundry. She chucked her stuff all over the house and made a mess everywhere. She would bring her muddy shoes into the house without cleaning them and make the whole hallway filthy. She had actually ruined one of my important work documents by spilling coffee all over it, and hadn't even bothered to clean it up. Due to all this, I had to wake up early just to make breakfast and lunch for Alice before leaving for work, and then clean all the dishes and vacuum the whole house before doing Alice's laundry with mine when I came back. Also, it became very clear that Alice was not even trying to find a job. She just kept ordering me to do stuff for her because she was my darling niece. She would also come home late drunk after partying with her friends. She would call me at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning to open the door for her because she had lost her keys. The worst was when I had to go out of town for one because of my job. I had told Alice that she wasn't allowed to call anyone over while I was gone. I was scared to leave her alone in my house, but she promised that she wouldn't do anything. Admittedly, I was stupid to trust her after the way she behaved, but I had no other choice. The night before I was supposed to come back, I got a call from my neighbor at 2 a.m. telling me that there was very loud music and screaming coming from my house, and that if I didn't make it stop, she would call the police. I realized that Alice had thrown a party despite promising me she wouldn't. I tried calling her to tell her to stop the noise, but she wasn't picking up her phone. I ended up having to drive home early after apologizing to my boss. I called my neighbor to beg her not to call the police until she agreed. It took me 2 hours to drive home. When I reached home, I could see that everything was trashed. My garden was ruined. All the flowers had been ripped by tire tracks and someone had thrown up in the bushes. The inside was even worse. My sofa had cigarette burns on it and my expensive flower vase was shattered on the floor. I was trying to find Alice to yell at her when I overheard her talking to her friend. Her friend was asking her how she was going to explain the state of the house to me. Alice just laughed and said, "It doesn't matter what I say. I only have to live with her for 2 more weeks. Once my mother comes back from her 3-month-long trip, I'll go back to living with her." That's when I realized that Mary hadn't told Alice that she had decided not to come back. She had met a guy in Bali and had decided to stay with him. She had only known him for like 2 weeks, but she said that she was in love. I also understood that Alice had decided to take advantage of me from the start. She thought that since Mary was coming back, she could just ignore all of my rules and treat me like her servant because she would only be living with me for 3 months. Once I realized that, I decided that enough was enough, and I wasn't going to put up with Alice's selfish and entitled behavior anymore. I pretended that I hadn't heard the conversation and just told Alice to get all of her friends out of the house. I didn't yell at her because I knew it would have zero effect on her. The next morning, I woke up early and packed up all of Alice's stuff. I woke her up and told her that she had the rest of the day to get all of her stuff out of my house. I told her that Mary wasn't coming back and that she was on her own. She was shocked and burst into tears. But I could tell that she was just trying to manipulate me. I told her that it was time for her to grow up and take responsibility for her own life and that I wasn't going to let her leech off me anymore. She tried to convince me to let her stay, but I refused. I gave her a final $50 and told her not to contact me again. Last I heard, that after trying to convince my mother to send her money, she had finally gotten a job at Starbucks. She had to live in an apartment with 4 other people, but hopefully she would learn to be less selfish from now on. I'm just glad that I'm free of Mary, Alice, and my parents and their terrible attitudes. My life is much happier since I cut them all off. Entitled friend, female. My husband, male. Me, male. So a little context. My husband had a bad childhood which he's only recently getting help for. So he can't do a lot of stuff, and he also needs to take many different meds that can't go with alcohol. Antidepressants, anxiety meds, sleep meds, etc. Not saying it's a problem to me, he's improving so much and I'm so proud of him. And all our friends know about it. One of our friends, I'll just call her EF, recently had a pregnancy scare, but she wanted to celebrate after it came back negative. She insisted that we go to a club or go drinking with her. After EF kept mentioning it over and over, my husband finally broke and agreed to go with her. I mostly went just because I don't trust EF with him. Not saying I don't trust my husband, it's the exact opposite. It's just that EF loves flirting, being overly sexual towards him just because he has a harder time setting boundaries because of what I mentioned earlier. About an hour after we got there, my husband ended up going outside for a break because of how loud and bright it was inside, and I left to go check on him. He told me that he was alright and that he'd be back in a minute, so I went back in, but I caught EF spiking his drink. It went like this. Me, EF, what the frick are you doing? EF, oh, nothing, obviously pushes his drink away from her. So is, husband's name, done with his tantrum or whatever? He's been gone for a while. Me, why the frick are you spiking his drink? You know he can't have that. EF, I just want him to loosen up a bit. He's so boring now. If I knew you'd be so controlling, I would have told you off before you started dating him. Me, he's boring because he's trying to get better. What the frick is wrong with you? I'm telling husband's name and we're leaving. EF, wait, don't tell him. Me, since you think it's okay to frick with other people's drinks, you can find your own way to drive yourself home. She was already far too drunk to drive home herself, but that wasn't my problem. I obviously told my husband what happened. After more pointless begging from EF to not tell him, and we left. She'd been flooding our voicemail with excuses for what happened for a couple days, but we've been ignoring her. So that's that, I guess. We are going no contact with EF, and I went back to the bar to explain the situation to them, and they said they wouldn't allow her back. Think that means she's banned. But I have so many other stories about her if anyone is interested. I might post those on this subreddit too. I'm sorry, but I'd put that everywhere. That's not only not okay, I feel like she's done this before. Honestly, if a man were seen doing this to a girl's drink, he'd be pounded like a punching bag and thrown out of the bar where the police could take him. The fact that she thought it was okay to tell you she was trying to loosen him up, I'm pretty sure if you didn't discover it, she probably would have done something to him in the few minutes you were away to get the car to drive them home. She thinks it's seriously okay to try to do that, then spin it not once, but twice? She's dangerous and needs to face serious consequences for her to stop. Who knows if that's why she panicked when she thought she was pregnant. Maybe she did this to someone else and she was afraid she was going to get caught. I thought maybe my neighbor had settled down and I was done with her behavior. I do hear her fighting with the upstairs neighbor now and then, but that's about it. This happened this afternoon and I'm still trying to figure out how her brain works. So in my previous posts, I explained how my new neighbor thinks she owns the building our apartment is in. Newsflash, she doesn't. And implemented some crazy rules, none of which were legal. It took a few arguments, but I thought she finally understood. She didn't own everything. Boy, was I wrong. So, as I am on the ground floor, I have a glass sliding door that opens out into the shared yard. Not happy about this, but we mainly treat it like a window anyway. Being that it was a nice, cool day, I had the door open, but the screen door shut and locked, so I could air the house out after having rained and the house smelling musty. Whenever that door is open, My cats will sit at it and watch all the birds outside. I was pretty tired, so my significant other suggested we both lay down and have a nap while I was waiting for the washing machine to finish. I thought, sure, why not? It's quiet today, and we went and laid down. We were woken up about an hour later to a rattling noise in the lounge room, and I thought maybe one of the cats had tried to climb the screen door again, so I got up to scold them and found my entitled neighbor trying to open my screen door, like really pulling on it to the point where the whole door was shaking. I asked her what she was doing, and she told me she had seen my cats through the door while on her way to hang clothes out and wanted to pet them, but the door was stuck. I told her it wasn't stuck, it was locked because this is a private residence and she can't just walk in here whenever she pleases. She kept trying to open the door while yelling that I can't keep my cats from people if they want to pet them, and it's her right to show them real love. I repeated that this was my home, and then she couldn't walk in whenever she wanted. This really seemed to piss her off, and she started to yell at me that I was a little witch and I was abusing my animals, and how dare I speak to her like that. At this point, I was pretty sick of being yelled at in my own house, so I just mustered up the sweetest smile I could before politely telling her to frick off. If looks could kill my cats, they would be eating my body right now. She tried to open the door again when my significant other came out and said that he would call the police if she didn't stop. She finally let go of the door, glared at us, and stormed off. Needless to say, we are ordering another camera for that door now, and yes, my cats are microchipped. ETA. Thought I might add this as it's been in a few comments. My phone was charging in my bedroom, and I didn't take it out with me when I got up. Where I live, the police aren't very helpful unless it's actually happening, but I didn't want to turn my back on crazy. My significant other only got out of bed when he heard shouting because he thought I was talking to the cats. Definitely got cameras, and I'm glad your cats are chipped. If you haven't started to already, I'd suggest you begin to document any interaction with her that is out of the ordinary. Dates, times, and as close to an objective explanation of what happened as possible. You never know if and when it might come in handy.